I'm not really anybody. I'm just a guy with an internet connection who is interested and sort of cares about what's happening in our country. And my everyday life, my work has nothing to do with politics. But over the last few years, just in interactions and being on social media and just seeing how things are going, it was really bothersome to me just how much division there that I was seeing. If you take Twitter or Facebook and the media sometimes at face value, you can see sort of all the differences, and you can see you sort of get this perception, or at least I did, that everybody was pitted against each other, and it didn't work for me. I reject that. And so when I sort of stumbled across the people through, over the internet, just doing what I do, it really called out to me the sense of how the people really looks for the common ground, how people uh, from all different backgrounds, from different perspectives, different ways of thinking, we're all encouraged. We are all in talk and to work on issues. Uh, that's really to me. It's why it's why we've been doing this. And the assembly this year is uh, of a very controversial election, uh, really trying to look ahead, trying to move forward. So the spirit here that we have today is to seek to other people's perspectives, and to share your frustrations and your anxieties. Yes, of course, express yourself, but also know and understand, and look towards common ground and solutions. So we've been putting it together for a while. And Jeff, how would you like to give us a bit of more words about how it is that we got to this place so far this year?
Hey, Ramsey. Yes, I'm another guy that has just got fed up with not people's beliefs in how things should be run, but the way they're run, and answered the call. And we decided the first thing we need to do is we needed to start listening. So we had 3 citizen engagement forums. They're not going to be our last 3. We plan on continuing this and figuring out. But one of the things, we had a speaker at one, we had videos that we looked about, we polled people, we listened. And what we found out when we were listening to people is one of the common themes is our elections and how they're held. And that was just, there's so many problems, there's so many things to address, but we're picking one at a time. And there, you're going to find with just this one, there's so many problems within that. And this is what we're focusing on. This is how we got to here. And this is why I think everybody signed up. So I hope you can sit back and enjoy and take part in conversation.
Thanks, Jeff. All right. I am going to, we're not a super presentation heavy today, but just had a couple things that I wanted to get in front of everybody, sort of housekeeping wise, as we get started. Just wanted to, as I mentioned when you came in, everyone's muted. Just cut down on background noise. We're expecting almost 100 people today. Gorgeous weather we're competing with, but democracy is very important. So thank you for being here. You will be able, though, to speak, obviously, in all the discussion groups. If you need any tech support during the meeting, you can email me. That's my email address up there, or text me is even better. And that number is also in the chat should you need it. If it would be helpful for you to have closed captioning for you there is a little diagram here where you'll find that if you've not used that yet on Zoom. If you go down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see live transcript, and you'll just want to click on the show subtitles and you'll be all set. So just wanted to run over really quickly, everybody, if you had a chance to look at it, had an agenda emailed out to you, but just so you know what our day looks like today. We are gonna get introduced to one another a little bit, and then we're gonna pass it on over to our fearless leaders, Andrew Shue and Katie Fahey. They are going to kind of set us up for the day and get us ready for our first discussion session. And then we're going to jump right in. You'll see we're going to spend a lot of the day just having some really meaningful and impactful conversations with one another. We've listened as you guys have kind of let us know that that's the areas within the Citizen Engagement Forum and other events that you really find a lot of value in, and we wanted to expand on that. So we'll have a good chunk of time in discussion around what those effective elections that Ramsey mentioned look like, the theme of the day today. We do have some breaks built in, so we'll take a break there, come back and talk about what a collective definition or effective election statement looks like based on, we have a team that'll be looking at everything you guys are kind of talking about during that session. We'll jump then into a second conversation with a couple of really important questions for us to tackle. Take another little break before we jump into the last part of our day, which will be an opportunity to introduce you to a very exciting resource that our Voting Rights Committee has been developing called the Votopedia. So hope everyone's on pins and needles, excited to see that. I know I'm very, very thrilled with that resource that's being developed. So spend some time learning a little bit more about that, and then have some time in a third round of discussion that's all action focused and where we go from here. Because if you know anything about us as an organization, if you've been with us a while or brand new, you know that we are all about, and then what do we do about it? So we're going to spend some good time in conversation about that. Then we'll have a few minutes to sort of wrap up and talk about where we go from here, and then we will send everybody off into their Sunday evening. With that, I am going to pass it on over to Jeff.
All right, we are going to have a quick survey. It's going to be two parts. We're going to have a poll that's going to pop up on your screen. It's going to have two questions. And what region are you from? Where are you? We want to know where you're from. We want to get a cross section of everybody. And then what brought you here? What have you done before? And quick little poll. The second part of it is in the chat. We want you to type 3 words of what you hope to get out of this meeting. What are you looking for? What's your hopes and the ambitions for this assembly? 3 words. And we're going to have a team in the background that is going to compile that, and we're going to look for common themes. So if you could answer that poll and type those 3 words in the chat, we'll be set.
All right. Chef, we'll give about 30 seconds or so for everybody to answer those questions. The poll should be up on your screen now. Should get some like Jeopardy music or something going. See where we get the most people from. It's also, while you're doing that, you'll notice some people like to go ahead and add their state in where their name is. If you can rename yourself with your name and the state that you're located in. It's kind of cool to see where everybody's from. You notice we've got people all over the country. Exciting. All right, we'll give about 5 more seconds to answer the poll, and then we'll open it up so everybody can take a look at the results.
And don't forget your 3 words.
All right. Right. Looks like we've got people from all over the place, and I'm loving these words that are coming in. Awesome. All right. Well, now that we know who's here and kind of where we're headed for the day, feel free to keep throwing those words in the chat, but we're going to pass it on over to Katie and Andrew.
All right. I'm going to save the best for last, so I'm going to go first. Is that okay, Katie?
That sounds perfect.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to say, maybe I've said this before, that 90% of life is showing up, but again, I'm just so impressed with the number of people from all different parts of the country who have shown up, who've made this a priority, who've not only shown up today, but shown up to the planning meetings. It is impressive, and folks like Ramsey and Jeff and so many others. So I just want you all to know that from Katie, myself, and the staff of the people, this only happens if you guys show up. And Katie's whole vision was that regular folks, when they get frustrated, if we can get organized, it can change the country and change the world. And that's what you're doing right now. We're still building those connections and building our skills and building our plans. But this is so important to be here today. So, I put a Facebook post out, or not Facebook post. It was Katie did the Facebook post. I moved up to Instagram with a special assist from my wife's Instagram following. So I was so impressed that hundreds of people responded, and then a solid group of about 50 people have just really been working on this, building this event. And the call out really was, can we have kind of an emergency family meeting, an emergency town hall meeting to see how we set a path forward as a country, knowing that we have more in common that divides us, knowing that we are in crisis, knowing that nobody's coming to save us, and that in the end, it really is up to us. So you guys answered the call, and here we are. And I have to say, this meeting is an example of what you can do if you stick to it. But we really have started to wake up folks all across the country in different sectors, corporate America and philanthropists and national membership organizations and activists of all kinds who are starting to see the need for exactly what we're doing today on a large scale. So we're planting the seeds for this kind of national come together that we're talking about. And what we're doing today and digging into the elections, and which we said is kind of the thing that right now everybody is most concerned about, because we know it's the crux of our democracy. We know it's the thing that now is dividing us because people are looking at it differently. So if we can come together and come up with a solid action plan on what we do around the elections, that just becomes an example to everybody else that this is possible. So the work we're doing today really becomes that example. So I hope you'll take it seriously and bring your ideas and be bringing your understanding and your listening skills and collaboration, all those things, because we won't be able to come up with a plan if we don't do all those things. So I again, thank you so much. I feel like we are definitely planting the seeds and building something that in this year and the next year will grow. And I can't thank you enough, and I'll pass it off to Katie. And I also just want to say a special thanks to Katie and the team. They've done an incredible job of pulling people together, getting people up to speed, giving them the skills and all that, which has been crucial. So awesome team job. I hope you guys have a great few hours together, and most of all, just feel inspired by what you're doing. This is democracy at its best. This is America at its best and what we can be. So have a great session.
Thanks, Andrew. And yeah, I remember it was before the election and Andrew and I were talking on the phone, and he was just saying, I feel this need, this urgency around wanting to just connect with other people and see if they are feeling this way too. Do you think anybody would respond if we did throw up an Instagram post just kind of saying, hey, we want to build something, but we want to do it together. What do you think? And I was like, I don't know. We could try. It's just Instagram. We can always delete it later. And then to put it up there and to see hundreds of people respond, there were the skeptics too, people saying, oh, this has to be some kind of political agenda, or, there's no way that people on whichever side, some people said the left, some people said the right, would actually want to sit down and be in a room together. But the most overwhelming response was the people saying, I've been looking to do something like this for a long time. I've been hoping somebody else is out there who feels the way that I do. And so to see and get to meet so many of you who responded to that and who continue to respond to that has just been really inspiring. And so thank you. Yes. And really quickly, if anybody who is on our leadership team, maybe if you want to do like one of the little emotion things, like you can do like a thumbs up or a raise your hand, but I'd love to just, if everybody can give a virtual round of applause for all the people who helped plan this, our little planning committee, I would love to do that. So thank you guys so much for the months of hard work. It really has been amazing. So I will clap, and then you can imagine 100 people clapping for you. All right. Quickly, I wanted to kind of give a little bit more background on the people. So I'm just going to share my screen really quick. We started a couple years ago in 2019, wanting to be a place for Americans to be able to not only come together, identify common ground, but also do something about it, specifically about our government and our elections, how they run, but also how governing works. Really, we wanted to find other people who think our country should be living up to what was even in our founding, the Declaration of Independence, a country where really the people hold the power, where it is for, by, and of the people, and trying to get back to that. We focus on a couple different areas. We focus directly in states. So we're doing a lot of work in New Hampshire by helping people come together in a state, identify what are some of those structural barriers to why our politicians or our political system isn't being responsive to the people or isn't being accountable to people. And we help folks figure out what that is and then make that change. Most often it's laws that need to be changed, need to be rewritten so they can actually be nonpartisan, so that there can actually be, consequences or changes to incentives for how politicians or people in office act. We also connect across the country. What things can we do at a federal level? Our Voting Rights Committee is a great example of that, where we try and see not only what can we talk about for federal legislation, but also just as people, how can we connect and show that actually there are those of us who see that we have stuff in common. Actually, there are those of us who want a system that just works for every single person, regardless of who they vote for. We just want it to be fair for everybody. We also have tools that we're building. We call that kind of our playbook section, where we can connect people to spreadsheets, which might sound funny, but like spreadsheets or guides for how to actually make change. I think a lot of us have a lot of problems that concern us. And we know what those problems are. We know maybe that we don't like how much money is spent in politics. We know that we want every American who can vote to be able to vote, but we aren't maybe sure what to do about it or how we can have an impact. And so that's what we're trying to just make easier for everyone to be able to do. And then I'll screen share again in 1 second, but when I was reflecting on today's theme of effective elections, which I know is going to be what our first breakout group is really diving into, I actually started with Googling effective, which is funny because I use the word effective a lot. So you wouldn't have thought that I needed to Google it, but it sometimes just helps my brain get more centered. And Google said, effective means successful in producing a desired or intended result, fulfilling a specified function, in fact, they're not formally acknowledged as such. So what kind of intended results do we want when we have our elections? When I thought, really, what does effective elections mean? And I think you can also think about, what is a not effective election? Is it easier to think about, okay, I know that I don't like when this happens. I know that I don't like that my friend who tried to get registered to vote had an error in her name, and so she wasn't able to and was denied at the polls, something like that. I think being able to think both of those ways can be really helpful. And as part of your registration, I don't know if all of you guys remember doing this, because I know some of you have probably signed up months ago, but we actually asked you also what effective elections is, or what that means to you. And Sarah created this little word cloud out of what people said. So contribution limits, honest, secure, access, fair, accurate, flexibility, transparent, voices heard, integrity, participation. Just thinking back again that if effective means getting what kind of result we want out of the elections, how should our elections be designed? What should the goals of that be? I think that, that's just one way to start thinking about it. So I wanted to kind of pause for a second, and if everybody, for yourself, I don't know if everybody has a piece of paper. We asked you to have one, as well as a good beverage, whether water or whatever your choice is, but since you'll have a long day. But what are one or two of the words that either resonate with you in this word cloud, or that aren't on this word cloud, but when you think of effective elections, and what does that mean? What might those be? And you can just write them down on your piece of paper next to you. Give you a couple seconds. And the other thing, while you're at your piece of paper, we're here also to talk to people who might have different definitions of what effective elections mean, but might have completely different experiences in what it's like to participate in our current election system. And I think that's really important. I think you probably wouldn't be here today if you didn't value being able to talk to folks who do have those different perspectives and lived experiences. And one of the things that I wanted to just ask everybody, I think everybody's had this experience, but I don't know if you have. Has somebody ever made an assumption about you on either how you vote or what you must think or what kind of elections you want based on just knowing something very little about you? Maybe it's about seeing your skin color. Maybe it's about your age. Maybe it's an assumption based on knowing what city you live in, or who you voted for president. If you've ever had somebody make an assumption that wasn't true or that just kind of didn't sit right with you because they didn't even talk to you first, you can kind of just write that down or just think of that time. I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to center us there for a second is just, I know I really don't appreciate when that happens. It makes me feel like my opinion or what I really think or feel doesn't matter as much, or that somebody's not even interested in getting to know me and seeing who I am as a person beyond just what they see on the surface. And I think that's the opposite of the kind of environment we want to do today. And at the same time, I think recognizing as well that it doesn't just happen to us, it happens to other people too. And so how do we go into these conversations throughout today and ask questions of curiosity instead? How do we try and check that bias in our own minds that makes us have those assumptions about somebody else? Because even though something might have been able to be said about you, at least I have probably done that to somebody else before too. Probably not on purpose, but maybe assumed how somebody believed or what they thought or even how they voted without actually giving them a chance. So just wanted to root us there. And I think sometimes in these conversations, asking more questions about why do you think that or do you think that too can be really helpful in these situations. And our first breakout is actually centered on how do we all come into this space and not only share our opinion, but also be able to listen to each other and kind of build those skills. A lot of times, especially online, if you're talking about politics, people aren't necessarily there to listen. They're maybe there to debate or to find other people who agree with them and just raw them on instead of taking the time to explore or have a good dialogue. It's also hard when you're just in a writing format and you aren't able to be face-to-face. Thankfully, Zoom helps us get around that a little bit. If you are able to be on video today, that would be really appreciative. It's certainly not the same as in person, but can help us get there. And as part of this first exercise, we're going to be playing the different roles that come about in effective, not only elections, but effective listening and sharing. For some people, sharing comes really easy. Being able to speak up, even if you have a different opinion, it's more natural for you. More recently for me, that's been the case, but especially growing up, I don't think anybody knew anything about my own opinions because I was always the very quiet one, kind of listening to everybody else. For other people, it's really hard to share your opinion. And so we want to practice what is it like to just talk and have you talk. So we're going to, in this exercise, be playing a couple different roles. And one of those is as a speaker. The speaker will be asked a question about what you think are effective elections, and you're going to have 2 minutes to respond, and we're going to leave it at those 2 minutes. So even if you only had 30 seconds to say something, you can start talking about your past life, whatever that may be. We want to hear you for 2 minutes and just be able to soak in what you're saying. Then another person in your group will be the listener. And the listener, your job is to listen for understanding. So sometimes we listen and we throw our own spin on things. We're listening to respond and say, oh yeah, either I agree with that, or here's how I see it differently. That is different than this role. This role is purely just to listen so that you can provide a recap or a summary after the speaker is done talking. So you will say to them, here's what I heard you say, not adding in any of your own ideas. And the speaker will actually get a chance to see if you are a good listener and say, yeah, that is what I was trying to say, or no, actually it wasn't, and here's what I was trying to say. So the role of the listener is really trying to remind all of us, how do we take a second first to not have our own thoughts, not be really focused on us and what our opinion is, but really be giving our attention to the other people deciding to spend their Sunday afternoon with us. And then the third position will be a questioner. So this one is really to ask a question to gain deeper understanding. It should be relevant to what the speaker was sharing. So if the speaker is talking about how they're really concerned about Native American access to voting in their state, and you ask them a question about what their favorite color is, that would not be a good question. This really should be a question about what they said and how we can get a deeper understanding. And the speaker will get a minute to reply to that. In most groups, I think we may have two people asking a question, so you can both ask a question and then the speaker will get to respond. And then that will complete one cycle. We will all rotate and go to a different position so that you get to be the speaker, the listener, and the questioner by the time we all come back together. Again, this is just a reminder for us for being able to really focus in on what are we doing here and how do we continue to first actually listen to you guys talk about effective elections, but how can we also be listening to each other, hearing other perspectives, other experiences as well. Trying to make sure I didn't forget anything. Sarah gave me great notes. Our hope is that by sharing, we will be able to come up with a shared definition. I'm sure it will be pretty broad of what does it mean as this group to have an effective election? What is that outcome that we're looking for? Do we have common ground or don't we? One of the things we'll be doing throughout the meeting, I just wanted to show you guys, is each group will actually have a scribe, and that scribe, we're going to have 10 different groups, and so the different groups each have your own section. And while you're speaking, we're going to have one of the note takers taking notes and putting in here what your thoughts were so that every single person is heard and we're listening to it. Then we have an amazing, we call them a theme team, who will be in the background actually reading everybody's throughout all of the groups and trying to compile them into that starting definition. So as you're talking, just want you guys to know what's happening in the background so that we can make sure that even though we are a group of 100 people and we've got a limited time together, you can see how we're trying to make sure everybody's voice is encapsulated in that. So I think that's about it. I just want to say thank you. Other thing I wanted to say is you can rename yourself by clicking on if you click on your Zoom screen and you click the three little dots. And if you want to put in parentheses what state you're from or city, I just think that's kind of fun. You don't have to, but that's kind of why I put MI in there. I'm calling in from Michigan, Grand Rapids, Michigan, if you're familiar with the state. But yeah, so I think we're ready to go. Good luck. The facilitators will help you with that question, but yes, thanks, Paige. The first discussion question will be, what will it take to have effective elections in our country? And you'll get a chance to answer that as well as listen.
Awesome.
And then,
well,
I was just going to say, during this exercise, yeah, if you also want to reflect on what part is easier or harder for you. Is it really hard to talk for 2 minutes straight? Is it really hard to listen but not be distracted by your own thoughts and opinions? What does that look like? And then also, as you're listening to everybody, if you want to try and think about what do we have in common for all of our definitions, but also what is different and how can we explore that more?
I hope everybody's excited to start talking. Just a quick reminder to our facilitators and note takers, we've done a little shuffling. So if your group doesn't look exactly like you thought, it's good. You're in the group you're supposed to be in. So, and we'll be here in the main room. If something happens and you need to come back, we can get you right back into your group. So have a great conversation and we will see you in about half an hour.
Really representative and ideally where our differences lie within a country where there is room for misinterpretation and assumptions about listening was very hard for me, not so much because I wanted to capture the very essence of what the other person was saying, so I had to write stuff down, And when I opened up and saying that that was a challenge for me, the person was offended by it, saying that I didn't want to listen, that I was being closed-minded, what they had to say. And that was not necessarily true. Is just medically, right now, I struggle with remembering things. So that's what I was trying to say. I wanted to capture the essence of what they said, and the assumption was made that I wasn't listening.
I think it's hard. I think especially because so often in political, when we are talking about ideas and especially somebody is feeling vulnerable sharing theirs, it's easy to assume somebody doesn't care. I think one of the good reminders for all of us here today is that you wouldn't be showing up if you didn't want to hear from other people with different perspectives. Because there are places on the internet, there are other Zoom groups where you can go and just talk to people who think exactly like you. And this isn't one of them. And we're really proud about that. But I think it is one of those good reminders for each of us to kind of think about, if we want other people to give us the benefit of the doubt, that we're here to listen, then we've got to reply with that same intention. Is there another group where somebody wants to kind of share either what was hard or what one of the common themes from your group was? And then if you're not talking, if you want to mute, that would be helpful.
Sure, Katie, I'll say a word.
Steve, yeah, thanks.
Your suggestion to have a note pad and a pen was very helpful for the listening part, but our common theme seemed to be open primaries. Several people, including myself, emphasized that, and we spoke about toxic partisanship and how it's gotten worse, and we discussed whether or not there was correlation between the growth of independents and non-enrolled voters and closed primaries, or even semi-closed primaries where unenrolled voters are forced to pick a side. So that was probably the major theme of our group.
Great. And maybe one more before I share the slide that has what the theme team worked on. Ramon, do you want to share? Or Raymond, I'm not sure. Sorry, which one it is.
Yeah, one thing that I found refreshing is that we were able to talk and not bite each other's heads off. Like what's happening on social media. Rita, once I heard Rita talking, I knew she had it on point. And I know what Rita goes through when she makes, this is her. I mean, she has the freedom to think whatever way she wants. She should not be attacked, especially from our own communities. And I think what I like is that we were able to discuss that here, and no one bites each other's heads off. We just listened and understood, where we're coming from. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you. Thank you, Ramon.
Awesome. Love to hear that. Well, I'm going to share what the theme team was busy working on really quickly. Although I did realize that I forgot. Oh, and if everybody can mute in between, that would be helpful. I did realize I didn't actually put this slide up, sorry, Sarah, of guidelines and ground rules, but I think now that we've had some practice, maybe this is a good reminder. So just some of the things, we had sent this ahead of time, but with any people meeting, this was come up with our volunteers over the last couple of years, but we want to always engage in thoughtful and constructive discussions. If you ever are feeling like, oh, I'm not sure if I can be constructive right now, one of those good reminders is just to take a breath. And I know it might sound silly, but we do have caveman brains. It's when we're feeling threatened or when we're feeling uncomfortable, sometimes it's easier to either like completely shut down or to go on attack mode. And sometimes we just have to get that oxygen back to the brain. We want to keep it positive, no mocking or demonizing people because of their beliefs. If you don't understand it, let's ask a question to try and understand where they're coming from and why more. want to remain respectful. You're allowed to still disagree, but you don't call somebody an idiot just because they don't agree with you. You want to keep it nonpartisan too, and speaking from your own perspective. So what that means is sometimes it can be really easy to make statements about other people. So you might personally identify as a Democrat, and then you're like, well, all independents think this. Well, if you aren't an independent, you probably shouldn't talk about their experience. So just making sure you're always talking about yourself and not trying to make sweeping statements about groups of people or how other people think or act. We want to make sure that everybody can be heard. So being conscious just of, if you're somebody who's more shy, we want to hear from you. That's why people are showing up today. If you're somebody where it comes more naturally, maybe sometimes waiting a second, letting somebody else speak first. If you're one of the first people to raise your hand, just kind of thinking about that throughout the day. And then when things get tense or frustrating, just remember we're here to find common ground. So just again, take that breath, try and ask that clarifying question, and you can always reach out to one of us too through the chat. So our theme team was busy looking at all of the groups and all of the many, many notes. I just wanted to say great job, note takers. We got, I believe, several hundred different ideas and comments coming from everyone. So between all of the groups, here's what was kind of rising to the top. And this is funny because I know, Steve, you had mentioned open primaries. So it seems like open primaries, which if you're unfamiliar with that concept, in some states, if you aren't registered as a Democrat or as a Republican, you can't actually vote in the primaries. And an open primary there's a couple different versions of one, but it means that regardless of what party you're affiliated with, or if you're not affiliated, you can participate in that primary. And in some states, it also means like you don't have to choose a party. You can actually just vote on all of the candidates who are running in the primary. Second bullet point, fair and easy access to the ballot, ending voter suppression. So I know the group I was kind of hopping into at the last minute. Sarah, it looks like the chat is still disabled, just so you know. I'm not sure how we switch that. But so if you're trying to type in the chat, apologies, we're working on that. Where was I at? Oh, okay. So wanting to make sure that if anybody is eligible to vote, that they are able to do so and able to do so with ease. More competition, less incumbent protection, more inclusive debates, independent voices need to be heard, access and opportunity to run for office. So taking down those barriers to what it means to run for office, trust and honesty, transparency for the process, ending toxic partisanship. I know our group is also talking about nonpartisan administration of elections, making sure that they're ran by folks who are nonpartisan, not there for a party. Combat the media's power with people's voices, consequences for spreading misinformation, redistricting reform, making it more reflective representation. I know in our group there was a voters should be choosing their politicians, not the other way around. Politicians shouldn't get to choose whether they want you to be their voter or not. Secure ballots and a process that has a through line where you can see where ballots are being counted, how they're being counted, transparency around that. Final four voting. And the last one, my Zoom is covering up, but more civic education so people can understand how elections work. Just for my group, I think we kind of talked about that too, also saying so people can understand what, especially local elections, what it means when you vote for that position. How can you have trust in that? So looking at that list, I know it's long, I'll give you a second to kind of digest it. Lots of different topics, but these were kind of some of the top. And then I wanted to go back to the word cloud really quick. What do we think makes effective elections secure, having access, fair, accurate, integrity, nonpartisan, flexibility, competition, and going back to this list. Is there anything missing from both of those lists that you really feel like if we want to come up with an idea of what does it mean to have an effective election, I'm still not seeing this reflected? I don't know if our chat is back up yet or not. So if anybody just wants to raise your hand. Oh, it is? Okay. Seems like you can type in this chat. Just a reminder, if you're not talking, if you can stay on mute, just to help with background noise. but yeah, if there's anything missing, if you want to type that in the chat, or if there's anything you're glad is on there and you want to type that in the chat too, that would be helpful. And the reason we want to make sure that we get anything else that may be missing is our hope, our theme team, we're going to keep them busy. We're about to hop to a quick break so we can stretch our legs. But our theme team is going to be trying to craft a definition of what an effective election is. We're going to try and make it not an entire slide worth so we can look at it, but then we're going to want to see if we can have kind of a shared understanding of what are we aiming for. What if we're going to continue to talk about what are the real solutions for creating effective elections? We want to know what is our shared goal of what an effective election looks like. Awesome, seeing some stuff in the chat.
Katie, I would just say in our group, I'm reading these bullets and I feel like our group spent a lot of time talking about integrity of the process so that afterwards people can't just spin out lots of theories about fraud and stuff like that. Like, how do we make sure that it really is secure? And I don't know if it's all captured under secure ballots and process, but there's so many different ideas about whether it was voter ID requirements, or somebody wrote in the email thing, the chain of custody for the ballot, so the ballot's secure through the entire process, or maybe having auditors who are professional auditors who aren't chosen by legislators, but who routinely go and audit the systems to make sure things are being done. So I'm not seeing a whole lot in this list necessarily about all of the integrity and security issues that I was hearing about from the group. They feel like maybe it's somewhere in secure ballots and somewhere in transparency, but it just feels like the conversation was much more rich and there were more ideas about how to do that than I see reflected here. So I know we have two more discussions, so I know this isn't the be all end all. So I just wanted to say that it feels like something's missing for me.
And I need to say something too, because my group, I mean, I think Bill helped me understand a little better what was happening, but they were really upset about, they wanted to blow the system up because they couldn't even talk about what we needed to do to get to fair elections because they felt they were just awful. Altogether awful. And that was hard for me to hear, as I was note taking. And that's certainly not here, I mean, and a lot of what I was writing in the notes was accurate. I mean, what they were saying. So I don't know.
I will say it might be helpful in understanding what these common themes we got. Carrie and Kath, I mean, probably a couple hundred, I would say, probably between the groups, ideas. So these really are the things that were consistently pretty much in all the groups. So there was a lot of really important stuff that was said in other groups that wasn't quite as common across all. So just to kind of give a little more clarity around where these are really the ones that like pretty much every group was saying to some extent, or the majority of groups.
I hear that, but I feel, I mean, listen, it was hard for me to hear this, but I don't feel that my group got represented on what they were really feeling in the end. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know.
Yeah, and that's good. Thanks for sharing, Elena. That's why we're asking this question and taking into account the chat too. So that when we get to that, definition, hopefully it can be reflective of what everybody's saying. So thank you. Any other, we can maybe do one more if there's anybody else anything missing. All right. Well, Sarah, if I'm doing this right, I don't know. Do we still have time? What's our time check?
We're running just a couple minutes behind, but we are going to take our break for sure. Everybody gets a chance to stretch and yeah. I want to take a second just to recenter again and
maybe remind yourself of what your intentions or what your hope for the rest of today's meeting is, and just take a second to write a quick little note. And the other thing is I'd like you to reflect on yourself too, and what is the energy or the way that you want to show up, and write down that as well. What are you hoping you can contribute for the rest of the day? My sound was slow, Sonia. I apologize. All right, so hopefully you've set your intention and your reminder. All right, Sarah, are we ready for me to screen share again? You're muted, so I think that was a yes.
Yep, sorry, we are all good for you to share.
Awesome. All right. So we're going to pop this up as a poll too, but our theme team, again, we gave them a super easy task of trying to take 100 people's ideas and figure out if there's one shared definition we can do. Oh, let me stop sharing sound. There we go. All right. Oh no, and Zoom's covering it for me. We are seeking effective elections. I can't read the top. I don't know if somebody else could read the top for me. My Zoom's covering it.
It says we are seeking American elections that are accessible, secure, transparent, fair, and not affected by outside sources. We want competition and access by many different types of candidates. We want open primary elections with high voter turnout.
Give you one more second to kind of read and digest that. I think the important part here is there any part of that that you for sure don't want? I'm sure there may be some things that you also want in addition to these things, but is there any piece of this that you strongly feel like, nope, that's not the kind of election that I would think is effective?
I wanted to, Katie, as we were talking before the break, we have a ton of thoughts related to effective elections. And so we don't want to think of this as like all inclusive, that we've packed every single important aspect into it. Again, these are the common themes that we want to be able to say collectively as this like diverse group of people that we have together. These are things that we can agree on as sort of like a common definition. That makes sense.
I think there are many ways to define open primaries. I think for this instant, I'm just going to keep it as a basic one, which would be that any registered voter could vote in the primaries, even if they are an unaffiliated, if they haven't officially become if they're officially an independent or unaffiliated voter, they'd also be able to participate. All right. So then do we have a poll, Sarah?
Well, we're going to do this one a little bit differently. So if you look down on the kind of right-hand side of your Zoom screen there, you see your reactions. We are going to do a thumbs up or no thumbs up on this. That enables all of our, everyone involved to participate, everyone that's was in the groups as facilitators and note takers. So if this is a something that you can support, a statement that you can stand behind, if you want to just add a thumbs up, and we will we'll see where we're at as far as majority support. And let us know what you think. And if it goes away on you, feel free to just plug it right back in there. Great, give just another second to think about it. All right. Well, looks like we definitely have some work to do on what that general definition of effective elections would look like for us as the people. I think an important takeaway for that is we are, we're able to speak with the diverse perspectives we were hoping we would have today. So there's a lot on the table that we're discussing about what it means to have effective elections, which I think is actually going to make the next sessions, discussions that much more important and really interesting. So, give it back to you there, Katie.
Awesome. Well, yes, thank you guys. And I think just keeping in mind what are those parts that are are important to you about effective elections. Because our hope is to not only just talk about what are we striving for, but to actually figure out if we have people from across the entire country who are showing up together across different political opinions, different life experiences, wanting to say, we want to do our elections better. We want effective elections. We don't have that now. How can we do that together? What changes can we make to guarantee that we have results related to our definition, or I guess tweaking it a little bit too, but then we want to make sure that we can come in with just that in mind and thinking about where can we agree and what can we actively do together. So for this next breakout session, I think I'm passing it over to Ramsey, but we wanted to kind of build on this a little bit more, taking that definition that we've created, taking kind of the thoughts that not only you shared, but you also heard from other people as we seek to figure out, okay, so what does a solution actually look like? What can we actually do together? That's where we're going into our second breakout. Ramsey?
Yeah, thank you, Katie. So here in this next section, it's really a chance for us to have some more discussions. And we're going to stay in the same small groups that we had in the first round for the most part. So with the folks that you've already met and gotten acquainted with, we're going to grapple with some issues because the definition that we're taking a look at that we've created, we have some pretty solid agreement on that in terms of people taking a look at that and giving sort of a preliminary thumbs up. But even within that very definition, you have some competing priorities. And that's really important and it's really vital because in order to have an election be really effective, we need to be able to do all of those things at the same time. And so the first question that we're grappling with is going to be, how can we balance the goals of both election integrity and voting access to ensure effective elections? One example that has already been brought up in the chat and is brought up often is the notion of voter ID, for example. How do you deal with whether we should be very strict or not be very strict about voter ID? So that's a good example of a competing interest that we really ought to discuss. And the second question is, how can we get to a place where the candidates on the ballot are those who can best represent their constituents outside of the influence of money or party affiliation? There's a lot of influence out there. Someone already brought the question of we should be able to choose our candidates instead of our candidates choosing us. But how do we get to that place where we can get people on the ballot who are going to represent people? So the way that this session is going to work is that we're going to start by kind of going around the virtual room and make sure that everybody has a chance to take a minute or two to express sort of their initial thoughts. And then have more of a free ranging conversation again after that. And please remember our guidelines and ground rules, which we looked at before. It's intended to be a constructive conversation, and by its very nature, we're grappling with some issues that are not easy, but they are extremely important. So I look forward to this discussion, and we'll do that now. What does our timing look like?
Right, so we're going to have about just under 40 minutes in this group. We did do, it's a long time to be on Zoom, so We have a little bit of shuffle just to balance the size of the groups out a little bit. So if you happen to be in a new group, you made some new friends. So, and we'll come back and report back after this. But yeah, a little bit longer in this conversation.
Okay.
All right. Have a great time, and we'll see you back in a little bit.
And then we wanted to hear from a couple of the groups from what those were, maybe the facilitators from those groups. So I don't know if I have a volunteer facilitator. I can't see everybody on my screen, but.
Katie, this is Carolyn. I'll volunteer if you'd like.
Awesome, thank you. Yes, I was trying to see everybody.
In terms of first of all, we all agreed that everyone who's on this call wants to ensure that integrity and access both are foundational building blocks to effective election. We all believe both have to happen. And I think an important additional step that we agreed to, knowing that different counties will use different methods, different machines, all 6 of us agreed that every election district should have a paper trail so that no matter how I pulled the lever, no matter how I voted, an auditor could check that my vote was recorded the way I cast it. We all agreed with that. And we had one more, if you want me to say it. We had a lovely discussion about how many different kinds of disability now need to be able to vote. One of our members, Sonia, shared her mother's now legally blind. When she went to vote, the only option they gave her was Braille. She doesn't know how to use Braille. So whether it's autism or a broken leg or being blind, that every district has to accommodate people that have some kind of disability.
Excellent, thank you. All right, how about another facilitator?
I could
Sandy?
speak, Katie.
Oh, Kathy, yeah, go ahead.
So two quick points I would add to this. We spoke at length about the importance of election administration being nonpartisan and the problems that come from political parties to run everything from the voter rolls to the adjudication process for when there's concerns about fraud. And that means nobody ever can feel completely confident in the process. We also spoke, a good point that was made in our group is that this is an area that we need to invest more in, that the government has to expend the resources necessary for voters to feel confident that every vote can be counted and that that access is easy but verifiable, and that we know that the election results are.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kathy. And then Sandy, I know I saw your hand, so let's do one more from the first question, then we'll hop to the second question. So other facilitators who I haven't talked to yet, I'll be coming to you next. Sandy.
Okay, so, you know, on the voter ID thing, when people are worried that some states will try to make it super onerous, you know, and as a way to suppress votes, we said, you know, maybe we should have a standard national requirement related to ID that's reasonable, and that we make it easy for people to get the ID. You have to put some effort into getting the ID, but you get the ID, and some, you know, legislator down in some state can't monkey around with that. It is what it is. That's how you get your voter ID. That was one thing. And then combining that with more days to vote, more polling places to vote at. You know, if we're saying that we want more in person to raise the security, then we got to give people more ability to get somewhere close by on a day at a time you know, that they can do it depending on whether they're night shift worker or day shift worker or whatever they are. And then the other thing was like for people for whom really getting to a polling place is very hard for whatever reason in any given year, it might be really hard, that you could have an online process as well as alternative, but again, the government has to invest in the highest level of technology and cybersecurity, and you want to have amazing fraud management on that system all the time. And we'd expect fraud in anything. We'd expect fraud in people getting their IDs. We'd expect fraud on the online system. We'd expect fraud to still try to take place in the in-person system, because you can't keep people from trying to be fraudulent when they want to be, but it would be kept to a minimum, because we would have invested properly. We'd have the auditing functions afterwards. We'd have the voter ID. So a lot of it, I think for most of us was just, we just need to restore faith in the system. And, you know, these would be ways we could do it in ways that we don't think would marginalize any specific group in our country and like make it just harder for that one group to vote. In fact, it's not clear to make it harder for anyone to vote if we did all these things in tandem. We didn't think there was a trade-off actually that needed to be made between integrity and access. We really thought in today's world with the kind of technology and resources we have, we should be able to deliver on both of those things even better than we're delivering on them today.
I think that was the opening comment from Mario in our group too. He kind of started saying, I don't think these are mutually exclusive. So thank you. I want to make sure we have time for the second question. And part of the reason why we did both of these questions is our last breakout group of the day, we've got 4 different topics. When you registered, we asked you kind of, where is your energy? If you could change one thing in the system, where do you want to be putting most of your energy and your time and your thoughts? And so that'll be our third breakout group, but we wanted to make sure that we were getting opinions from everybody, regardless of which of those 4 they find the most important in these breakout discussions before going to the final one, so that you could hear from people who might not say voting security is my top choice, but here's what I think about it, because I do think it's important. So the second question was, how can we get to a place where the candidates on the ballot are those who can best represent their constituents outside of the influence of money or party affiliation? So if you haven't typed in the chat yet kind of your top themes for that one, please do. I think some of you have already typed both, so that's great, overachievers. And then if some of the other facilitators who I didn't hear from the first time could raise their hand. Debbie, maybe I could start with you on kind of the themes from your group for that second question.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that came through in the second question was getting fresh blood in terms of candidates. And some talked in terms of term limits and age limits, how we can get younger people in there, and just ways to go about that. So, you know, we could do it through voter education. We can do it through helping people understand how they can get involved in the process, and really encouraging people to be engaged and to truly walk the walk and not just, you know, be talking about what they want done, but actually get involved. So that was probably the biggest theme for the second question is getting fresh blood and getting people engaged across the board, across communities, across ages, and things like that.
Awesome. Do you have another facilitator, maybe Ramsey or Jeff?
I can jump in here for a bit. Related to that second question, we definitely sort of talked about the fact that money and political party seem to dominate and control the elections, and really sort of lamented the perception that we really only have 2 choices, you know, that they're presenting to us only 2 choices, and that we certainly ought to have more. And so we had some conversations about ranked choice voting and about how that allows multiple candidates and without being a spoiler for one party or the other. So looking at some of those as solutions, but really sort of also just acknowledging that it's tough to imagine how to change the system when it's the political parties themselves who have control over how the rules are written. So, you know, taking finding ways to have fair rules written that don't, squeeze out independence, but figuring out how to do that apart from the parties themselves seems like the real trick. And we didn't necessarily know how to do that, but it seemed like that was the way to do it.
Thank you. Do you have another group that's willing to share?
I'll go with group
Thanks,
5. The big one that I don't think anybody mentioned, that kind of where you got started, was ending gerrymandering. But that's more state level. Talked about democracy vouchers and leveling the playing field as far as campaign budgets to make it easier for independents and everything to participate. And we hit on special interests and multiple problems with the special interest, from the amount of money they can donate to cushy jobs after politics, loopholes in campaign donations, so campaign finance reform in general, and wearing those race suits with all their sponsors on it. So
awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Yep, I think that came up in our group as well. All right, do you have anybody else who wanted to share from your group, facilitators?
Katie, I would add,
Yeah.
I would add that one of the things that we discussed in our group was misinformation, how misinformation has been a problem, causing candidates to be falsely represented, or, whether it's social media or even mainstream media, the challenges of getting the truth.
Thank you. Yep, that was definitely talked about in ours. And at the very end, we were talking about civics education too, and just like, what can that look like? How can we make it more participatory? But how do we just help people navigate the political process, whether running for office, to help more people feel like they can, or they should be able to even just what are the laws and the ways that money is spent, the ways that money can be influenced. That was great. Well, thank you, everybody. I want to keep us on time, and we're headed to our next break after all of that mental gymnastics once again. And when we're coming back, we're going to be hearing about our Votopedia, which will be very exciting, and it'll actually be helping us with our last breakout group for the day, which is the one I'm really excited for, which will be that topic, hopefully your number 1 or number 2 topic that you chose that you want to dive deeper into, really taking all of the thoughts and the good thinking we've been thinking all day, and trying to apply it to, we have a really powerful resource here. We have Americans spending their beautiful Sunday afternoon trying to talk to people that they know that they probably aren't going to agree with, and figuring out what can I do and what can the collective we do to actually make a difference, and make it so that when we hear politics, we don't have to roll our eyes. We don't have to feel like or hear from other people that their vote doesn't count or doesn't matter. How can we actively create a country that really is this grand experiment of having people, all of us, not needing to be royalty in order to rule ourselves, in order to be able to create a society and a country that reflects our communities, our interests, our issues, where we can be represented both locally as well as federally, where it doesn't matter if, we're calling in from the south, north, east, or west. We have somebody in DC caring about us. There's somebody in our state capital caring about us and making sure we're being fought for. And so we'll be breaking out into specific topics to really try and figure out what can we do collectively as a group, and what does that look like moving forward. This assembly was, as Ramsey and Jeff had explained in the beginning, was the reason we ended on effective elections is we listened. We started with listening to hundreds of people on what do they really have a lot of concerns about, but there were a bunch of other issues even beyond just this. And so we also want to look at what are other issues beyond even effective elections that we know are critical to getting an accountable, responsive government. So I'm going to throw us into a 10-minute break. Is it still 10 minutes, Sarah? Sorry. I always start chatting.
Yeah, I think we can, we're good with 10 more minutes, yeah.
Okay, so 47, it's in where I'm at, East Coast time, Eastern Standard Time. I don't know why I keep saying East Coast. It would be 5:47, and I'll put up the little timer again too. But thank you guys. Make sure that you do go and keep thinking about these ideas, and we'll look forward to seeing you again. If you have any other thoughts, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll see you soon. All right, thank you. I wanted to say, David, I really liked that you said until we get money out of government, we can't really make a difference in election spending, because so many people are going to want to keep infiltrating it and having that influence to get those large dollar contracts. It was just a new way of thinking of money in politics, and I really appreciated that. While I was burning my mouth on pizza, I was kind of thinking more about that, and I appreciate you coming with that. All right. Well, as I said, in a second, we will be going to breakout groups on your specific topic that you chose. You should have received an email that had a version of a report card on it. You might have been a little confused by that in your most recent registration materials. But that's all because we want to really think about what kind of impact not only can we have, but how can we then go and make that impact happen. There was a project started in the Voting Rights Committee, and I'm sure Betty and Mike will tell us more in a second, but it was really about how can we look across the country and see the differences in how elections are handled and really understand like what is a best practice, what isn't as good of a practice. One of the things I love about this project, beside it being completely volunteer created, ran, and just like a phenomenal work product, is that so often I think people know that they're upset. They can tell that the system's broken. They maybe have their own frustrations with trying to interact with the political system. And it is probably not just one idea too. It's probably many problems that we have, from maybe gerrymandering to money in politics to not feeling your vote counts, or not being able to show up anytime that isn't a Tuesday before 8 p.m. to vote, whatever it may be. It can sometimes be hard, though, to think about, like, how can we even do something about this? I know I personally have felt overwhelmed before by just feeling like so much is wrong, or it's such a big problem, especially when it comes to the federal level, that it's like, I don't even know where to start because I want to make change, but I know I want to make change. I think one of the really great parts of this report card is it helps you actually go and see, here are examples of laws that have been changed that impact these different categories, like that impact how many people can turn out to vote, that impact how much money gets spent in an election, that impact whether constituents are in competitive districts or not, those kinds of things. And I think being able to have an actual tool where you can look and not only see your own state and see information, but see how other states are trying to solve these problems, I think is a really interesting piece that we hope is a start to what can be helpful for this following conversation. So Mike and Betty, I'll pass it over to you guys if you want to talk a little bit more about the report card, and then we can share it with everybody.
Thank you very much. My dear friend and partner Betty nominated me to do this, but I'm glad she's here, and I'm sure she'll keep us honest. We've had a wonderful partnership. We have a fantastic committee, and very glad to present this, what we hope will be a fantastic tool available to the people and beyond as an objective source of information. To start to introduce, I'd like to quote, we have a member of our committee who's unfortunately not here today. He's a wonderful guy, Lynn Hunneman, and he's in New Mexico and Arizona. I don't know how he does that, but he is. And you may have noticed he's written some very interesting and thought-provoking pieces about civics and civic education. But he made that we were talking about this, and the Votopedia, which incorporates both voter access and election integrity, he made the comment, which I thought was just tremendously artful and insightful. He said that voter access and election integrity may be in tension, but they need not be in opposition. Let me say that one more time. May be in tension, but they need not be in opposition. In other words, they can be woven together. Our committee is concerned with both those types of issues. We've been doing this actually going back to last year. But let me start off by saying that the right to vote is a fundamental one in our country. It's the ultimate voice of the people, of the voters. And while, as we've discussed today, while a lot of other issues are significant that stand between the voter and they're seeing their will expressed effectively, such as dark money, such as gerrymandering, such as closed primaries, etc., that as Senator Warnock said, the right to vote is the fundamental right, without which the other ones have no meaning. That unless a person gets the opportunity to vote in the meantime, what happens with that vote is inconsequential. Just a real quick summary, and I've written in the newsletter before, but originally the right to vote in this country was limited to white males over 21 who own property. Kind of a small group. As time went on, in the Constitution, actually, it was improved after World War II. As you'll recall, that African Americans, we now call them, were originally considered 3/5 of a person. That did get changed. And on paper, the right to vote was extended. Women in this country, half of the country, didn't have the legal right to vote until 1919. Native folks who were here many hundreds, if not thousands of years before any of us, were not granted by the majority the right to vote until 1924. The General Voting Rights Act took place in 1965, which most of us know. And so at that time, we thought we had a stable understanding of the compact between the people and the government. Unfortunately, that changed in 2013, and that is what has led to just all kinds of, I hardly know how to characterize it, but all kinds of insecurities, uncertainties, and worse. And so we're in that place right now. What we're trying to do, well, let me real quickly, what we did last year, we got into this, as you will recall, a little over a year ago, the pandemic hit. At the same time, anyone who's familiar with voting procedures across this country knows that most of the folks that work the polls in person across the country tend to be of an older age. It was readily apparent that these were the most vulnerable to the ravages of the pandemic. And so for that alone, as well as the voters who are of that age, and so many of us who before pre-vaccine were susceptible or worried. So we came up with what was called the SAFE Challenge. And I'm glad to acknowledge our friend Kathy Stewart, who was our staff member at that point. We worked very hard and very closely together, and we came up with a program with utilizing our numbers. We had folks in 43 different states across the country who reached out or spoke out in one way or another in favor of the safe, fair, and secure option of vote by mail. We got information from the Vote at Home Institute, an excellent source, and others, and we were able to raise our voice in a very timely and quick manner, and to find it resonating with many other organizations and people. And as you know, we experienced record turnout across this country last year. And by the numbers, you would have to say that those people were happy to have that option. Is it perfect? No. Is it disastrous? No. So we were able to help with that initiative, and very proud that we did. As this year comes along, now we're looking at, okay, now it's an infinitely more complex situation. Fortunately, we have this brilliant guy on our committee who gladly took this on. And so what we've done, let me make very clear, the entire idea of this Votopedia is to have an objective, factual resource. We call it Votopedia because we really hope, we're not quite done with our work on this yet, although we're done on the first, pretty much on the first phase. We hope that people across the country will feel comfortable with this as an authoritative source of information from their state on different variables. There are quite a number of variables, as you may have noticed. And so our progression is this, and then I will introduce the two gentlemen who've been working on this. Our progression is the following. Today, we're introducing this to all of you. Of course, our time is limited. We're glad to have this time, but it's not enough to really give a full exposition of what this is and what it might do. But this is intended as an introduction for all of you. And we will proceed from there this coming Tuesday. Our voting committee, whose members have been looking at this and working on this for months, will do some further work on it. And please note on your calendars, May 26th. May 26th, we'll have a citizen engagement forum, and the entire length of that will be devoted to a further exposition of these issues and toward having all of you show up then to not only learn more about it, but to have a voice in some of the priorities that are there existing. So at this point, I would like to introduce, we have two gentlemen, Paul Burke and Fernando Borges. And Paul will characterize it, but he has researched and done the detail work. And Fernando has done this, I call it the magic map. He's taken that information that Paul generated and he's got it into an interactive electronic map that's very user-friendly. So at this point, I'd like to turn the floor over to Paul Burke.
Okay. Trying to find my share screen here. Share screen. Well, this will work. So let me get rid of this thing. I'll go across as Mike said, there's a lot of information on each state, and I can go very quickly across and give you a flavor of the kinds of information. I put in the chat a link to the PDF that has all of this information and definitions and more discussion of all of it. I can look here at the 3 or so states that have Michigan, California, and New York have most of the registrants from this assembly. So you'll get a sense of what's going on in those states, and then there's information for all the other states. So it shows information. Does the state have a nonpartisan redistricting commission to avoid gerrymanders? Michigan and California do, New York does not. Do they have limits on campaign contributions? Michigan has fairly tight limits on campaign contributions. California and New York are not as tight. Do they have publicly financed campaigns? Michigan does for some of its elections, and California and New York don't. It compares the turnout in 2020. Of these 3 states, Michigan had the highest turnout. And then it compares the youth turnout. And all 3 were fairly comparable on that. It looks at the minority turnout. And Michigan did better there than California or New York, which I think often that reflects not the work of the state, but the work of all the activist groups that have turned over every effort that they can to get people out to vote and make it possible for people to vote. And so you'll see here, there are things that need far more than government action to improve. There's access to weekend voting. California does not require weekend voting during the early voting period. A lot of places have it, but it's not a state requirement. New York requires quite a few days, and Michigan requires some days of weekend voting. Access to voting by mail. The days to cure a signature. If you mailed in your ballot and you forgot a signature, or they think the signature doesn't match the signature on file. In California, there's a lot of time to cure that. In Michigan and New York, not so much. And then this next is from the National Vote at Home Institute that Mike mentioned, the quality of the vote by mail lists. Michigan and California, they think they do that. The states do a good job of maintaining those lists. And then the signature checks when the ballots come in. There's a lot of talk earlier about integrity, security of the elections. So that's part of that process to be sure the ballots are coming from the people who are registered to vote. Is there a good paper trail? Are there audits? Is it a good sample for the audits? And these states aren't as good. They do audits, which is many states don't at all. The sample isn't as good as in some other places. Do they audit all the contests? California and New York do, and Michigan does not audit all the contests. And whether the public can get copies of the ballots so that they can check themselves independently. So as I said, the information is in the screen share, and now I'll stop and turn it over to Fernando.
Hello, everybody. I'm pulling up the screen share right now. Okay. So this is the Voteopedia website that Mike was referencing earlier, which hopes to kind of make all of Paul's information a little bit more accessible and hopes to just drive up accountability as a whole. The idea stemmed that we wanted to just have more people involved in the whole process. And by making the information readily available to anybody at all time and in a method that's kind of easy to take in, we could just get more eyes on the subject and hopefully more people working. So here is Voteopedia. We hope to drive up election integrity across the US. So as I mentioned earlier, we hope to just get everybody on board and get more ideas by just having more people looking at the problem and understanding how it affects them in their own particular state. We hope to do so. Kind of how Paul was mentioning earlier, talking about the report card. These are the specific categories we look at for all of our information. So we look at campaigns, turnout, access, and integrity. And when you see the map, all of the grades are by some sort of combination of these. These are the different variables like Mike was mentioning earlier. Just to give like a little sneak peek. So for campaigns, some of the subtopics are gerrymandering, political contributions, and competitive candidates. Another thing that's good about the website is that we will have kind of close to real-time updates where as the laws change, we'll update the site. So it'll be a source that is kind of as up to date as possible. Okay, so let me just pull up the map. This is the map where it stands right now. Here are the different variables under the different categories. So here you have access, campaigns, turnout, and checking. So if you want to look at a specific variable more than others, you're able to change the weight. Say I only wanted to look at weekend early voting across the states, you're able to look at it. And the lighter states are the ones that are doing better. The darker states are the ones that are doing a little poorly. You can see that reflected by the grades, like New York has an A and Florida has a C, for example. If you look at New York, you're able to click on it and see all of different breakdowns, like why they specifically got an A. And you're able to click on this and kind of like I mentioned earlier, be guided into like what steps you can take. So these are a collection of different organizations that are working to make a difference in each of the states, and then some national groups as well. The whole idea behind the map, as I mentioned earlier, is for it to be a way for people to get introduced into the topic. Right now, it's working mainly as an information source. We hope that later it will become kind of a funnel where people can understand, okay, this is an issue. This is an issue that affects me particularly. And what can I do? We hope that through the map, they'll be able to easily access to that. What can I do? And lastly, kind of a little bit later on in the timeline, we hope that the map can be a source that will allow the different organizations looking to make a difference to kind of get together and kind of just understand, like, for example, if you're looking at the map, you see Colorado is doing well, Oklahoma not as well. So if you're a voting rights organization working in Oklahoma, maybe you can take some inspiration from some of the organizations working in Colorado, for example. And that is the map.
Thank you, Fernando, and thank you, Paul. I'd like to say as we go along, as I commented last year, we had some involvement of people in 43 different states. We hope to get help from some or all of you along the way because as we get this thing going and present it, it's going to be essential to keep it up to date, or people won't be able to rely upon it. So what we're hoping is, and you can Google certain things, but there's a qualitative difference to having people on the ground who live in the state, who are familiar with the dynamics, giving feedback. So it'll be like representatives that are in various states. So please be thinking about that, because we're a relatively small group. We have an opportunity, I think, with this to do big things. And we've already made initial contacts with some very significant groups, such as the League of Women Voters, Represent US, et cetera. And, but it's going to be, and I would like to say again, I can't commend Paul enough. He did the original work on all the research, and he found, if you look, he identifies his sources, and these are really objective sources with a fine reputation, and that's where we begin. And so we may go back and forth on some aspects going forward, but it's our intention and our aim to have good, solid, factual information that people, everybody will all have our opinions. But the idea with this tool, with Votopedia, is to have a good, reliable source of information, and then people can go and fight after that. But the idea is to provide the best, do the best we can, and we think that we can complete our work, and with all of your help, have this be something that would be respected and used across the country. With that, are there, Paul and Fernando are still here, and as is Betty. And I don't know how much time there is left, probably not much, but we would love to have you on the 26th in particular. But if they have any time left, if somebody has a specific question or two.
I'll note, Mike, too, for everybody, the link, if you'd like to register for that event on the 26th, is in the chat. We'll also send it out, and it'll be on our calendar. But if you want to go ahead and right now get registered, that is in the chat.
And I'll just say one more time, I can't say enough good things about what Paul and Fernando have done and how much time they've dedicated to making this happen. But I think now, and the members of our committee, I think now is the time where anyone who has an interest on this, helping on your own time or whatever, we'd be more than glad to hear from you, and look forward to seeing you on the 26th. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Huge virtual round of applause again. I'll do my little emojis. And I think, Mike, if I have it right, as you're looking at it, if you have more questions, you can, or suggestions too, on how to more data, or if you have, you live in a state and something doesn't feel right or something, I think it's reportcard@thepeople.org. You can just send us an email, I think. Is that right?
Is that right, Sarah? Okay.
Yes. All right. Reportcard@thepeople.org. So thank you guys so much. So we will be headed into our last breakout session. And we will, like I said, we kind of broke you into different topics earlier. We'll be wanting to kind of see, even under some of these topics, like money in politics is a great example. There's a bunch of different ways that we could change it. Even the report card shows, caps on spending. I know some of the other groups had brought up public financing. What does that look like? What does that mean? So we're going to want to hear kind of where you see a priority, where do you see the largest impact could be made, listen to some other people about that too, and hopefully identify kind of how much interest is there in really wanting to do something about this together, and what might the first priority for the people, if a group of us wanted to form a committee, like the Voting Rights Committee is a great example. They kind of found the issue and they then ended up making a project and getting to work on it. What might that look like? That's the other part of that time that we'll spend together. So Sarah, the breakout's ready. You're muted.
Talking away. Just really quickly, so registration gave us your top 3 of the topics that we're covering. And so you are in one of those 3 issue areas that you gave to us. And your facilitators, when you get in, will let you know specifically which one, as we did some shuffling around to make sure we had those balanced conversations number-wise. So we'll have just about half an hour, and then we will come back and recap on it. So everybody have a great time.
let's hear, and we've only got a couple minutes for each group, so just kind of the top lines of where the conversation was focused, but election integrity, could you share first?
Sure. Let me get to the right screen here. So I think where we boiled down to is just the most essential thing is to ensure that every vote gets counted accurately and that the chain of custody is established, and so that as votes move to totals and the totals get moved to counts and counts become elections, that there's better electronic tracking that those hadn't changed in any way and that they get reflected correctly. So from practical sense, things like having external auditors that are independent, making sure that practices are happening correctly, and having chain of custody for things like USB drives and for computer files, and finding a way to publish them publicly but anonymously in order to make sure they don't change. And those are all obviously very big kinds of topics, but those were the most important. They rose to the top for our conversation.
Yeah, but sounds really kind of like some detailed, tangible, this is what security would look like, so, or integrity would look like. I appreciate that. And I do want to say too, I think Sarah will be dropping in the chat we have a survey for you to be able to plug in, like where you feel like you want to take the most actions. As you're listening, you might want to think about that. Also, if you have any suggestions for this meeting, and we're hoping to plan more on other topics. So if you want to get involved in that, that'll be there too. Let's hop over to election access, voting rights, maybe. Might have gotten that wrong. I think you guys know what I'm talking about.
The group that did the kind of whole gambit of everything, we're looking at some more open vote by mail, the National Voting Rights Act, or at least some minimum federal standards and guidelines on how voting can take place and access to the voting. We figured too restrictive could cause issues. But there needs to be some minimum standards that all the states need to comply with, and that might be a better approach. Let's see, again, the issues with the primaries. It was discussed having, when you register to vote, you just register. You don't register under a party, and then you have access to everything. And then access to the election process itself from candidates and independent candidates. I don't know if anybody wants to add something that I missed.
Yes, and you can add it into the chat too.
Just two more things. We also mentioned ranked choice voting as a positive, and the ballot issues, Katie. The legislature shouldn't be able to block and have such terrible requirements for the citizens to have ballot initiatives.
Our group talked a little bit about getting other states to have ballot initiatives too. That's a good segue, Mike, into redistricting.
Pour vous.
Yeah, our group talking about redistricting talked a lot about the importance of independence in the terms of not a politician drawing lines for districts as opposed to politicians drawing their own lines. We pretty much had great consensus around that. There's we had conversation around what should a district look like and what's in a district, and the importance of community participation and people sharing their perspectives on what they want their district to look like, kind of that idea of participating in your democracy. And we talked a little bit about that it's challenging. You can't pass a federal law to impact how states draw their own districts within a state. So it is a state-by-state approach as well. So talked a little bit about how it's challenging to want legislators to legislate their own powers and how they might not be willing to do that and how we might be able to overcome that.
Great, thanks, Paige. And then the money and politics group.
Yeah, so I think it got boiled down to, I mean, we probably would have had a longer list if we had more time, but in the time we had, there were 4 things that I saw us talk about. One was more public financing. And the reason I'm starting with that one is because we think maybe at a state level, it might be an easier thing to fight for and get. Because if you can get some more public financing options, it will help more candidates enter the race and have a chance of having enough money to compete fairly. So that seemed like a thing that we should try to spread more across the country. So things that become more difficult would be trying to shorten the election cycle, because that's not something we've ever done. So that would be a new thing, but it could be a new thing that could become the next hot pancake that everybody wants. Let's have shorter election cycles. So less money would be spent. Something else that's more moderately difficult would be actually coming up with limits about how much candidates could spend on a campaign in total. So right now we limit how much people can spend on a candidate or contribute to a candidate, instead of limiting how much a candidate can spend on their campaign in total. So could we come up with, on a state by state basis, something that's reasonable if you're running for local mayor versus governor versus this, you know, you can have a pretty broad range, but it's like, but there's still a maximum amount you can spend, and that could help. The things that start to get to be really difficult are getting inside the corporate PAC process, and how much money with Citizens United, just how much money can now flow from corporates, from unions, from who knows where, dark money coming from who knows where. That whole ball of wax feels like it would have the biggest impact if we could make a difference, either overturning Citizens United and or putting more rules and regulations on the corporate PAC process. For example, where they couldn't incentivize employees to contribute dollars to specific PACs that help that company on their issues. There's just things that are happening out there that continue to add weight to the power and influence that these PACs have in our system. But that is going to be a hard one. That's going to be a hard battle to fight, especially given the recent ruling on Citizens United. But we feel it's really important. So that's probably the biggest impact one and the hardest battle to fight. And then some of the more shorter term or moderate battles to fight would be around public financing options, maybe some limits to campaign spending, and maybe shortening the election cycle just so you have less time to spend money. So less money would get spent. Those are some of the ideas the group is playing around with.
Awesome. Again, kind of, yeah, a variety of solutions that kind of can happen federally or locally. That's great. I know we're running quick on time, but thank you guys all. And I think if you're interested in more than one topic, since you only got to talk in one, we will be having follow-up. One of our big things for that link that I think Sarah popped in the chat, and maybe we'll be repopping in the chat, is we want to understand where the energy is and who really wants to be taking action together. We work a little differently than a lot of other organizations. We only do things based on our volunteers and where they want to be leading and what they want to be doing, and helping empower us to find networks across the country who want to work on those pieces too. So that's really important. I think, in general, just kind of recapping the day and everything we've done, which has been a lot, came in really wanting to focus on effective elections. And what does that even mean? What is the outcome that we are striving for when we say effective elections? And it sounded like an election that can guarantee security, where people can trust the results, because there are consequences for lying about those results, but there's also enough information out there that people understand how the system works. We want a system where every person who is eligible to vote can easily do that. I heard a lot of times, especially in this day and age, I heard that phrase kind of a lot, which I think is a reference to technology and the fact that we have people from a bunch of states all talking together through video right now, yet some people can't, even get access to a ballot. So how do we look at everything from registration through voting to then even auditing those votes? How do we make it transparent and work and easy to understand for all of us? And also I heard another theme of nonpartisanship. how do we really take the politics out of elections, because they should be about the will of the voters, not the parties. And primaries, of course. I don't know if I had mentioned that too. And we dove deeper to really see and explore the idea of, does security and access have to be at odds, or can we actually achieve both? And what would that look like? Same with candidates. Do we have to either have our current political system, or is there a way to get more representative candidates? Is there a way to try and make sure that people are winning based on how they're running instead of just who can spend more money? And then lastly, we dove deeper into 4 different topics on, so if we have some alignment, we think we know what our outcome is, and we're hoping to then go and make that outcome a reality so that our next election can have more integrity, can be more effective. What will it look like to actually sit down and change those things? It sounds like we kind of got to the high level of that. Like, here's some ideas that are exciting, but we obviously have some planning to do beyond that to really see, you know, as this group of people, what can we do both locally and nationally to make those kinds of impacts. I think if there's anything else that pops to your mind and you want to type it in the chat of just kind of what you're walking away with or what you see as an important thing we talked about today, please do. Andrew, I don't know, I think you're here somewhere. I don't know if you had anything else to say. We've got 3 minutes, but I wanted to say, you know, we have everything from the report card, which we'll be having our next session on May 26th. You can, I think Sarah's popping in the chat too, kind of our calendar link. We have a great newsletter that goes out every week, which will give you the highlights of what meetings are happening, as well as what's kind of the news around the country, as well as with people that you can subscribe to if you go to thepeople.org. But I think the important part is that it's great to identify common ground and to actually see that we have similar goals, even though maybe some of us want to focus on one priority over another. Some of us really want to make sure the ID system is there first, and others want to just make sure that access is there first. But those weren't mutually exclusive ideas. And I think the important part is this doesn't end with the conversation. It ends with then figuring out, what is the real way that we make this a reality? How do we take what we've heard and listened to from other people as well as ourselves and actually create a country that is better and that can hold more effective elections? And looking forward to what that will look like. We're, like I said, we have that survey and we have the Voting Rights Committee already, although we're interested to see what other committees people may want to be a part of, but we really want to see, where is your largest interest? What is the thing that you want to spend your extra time working on? Obviously, we talked about money in politics, redistricting, election security, access, a variety of other topics, civics education. So please fill out that survey and let us know. And then also, we're looking to hold more of these conversations like this. What other common ground should we be finding? What other topics do we feel like there's maybe ideas that aren't mutually exclusive, like security and access? What else can we be diving into, even though on the surface, it might feel like people don't agree, but we see that there could be possibility of agreement. And that's all up to us. Andrew, did you want to say anything?
Yeah.
I asked you if you did, and then I kept talking.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I've moved outside here, and I was thinking, you know, how I'm outside. I can see the trees. I'm in the forest here, but I feel like we can see the forest from the trees now, and I think that all of you should know, especially the newcomers, that you're part of history, that this is 3 years in the making. And, you know, the idea of organizing the American people to become a force for change is a big idea, and it's actually never been done before. So you should all feel proud of being part of this adventure. And it's definitely something, obviously, with the pandemic that has not been as easy as possible. And we want you all to try to keep on getting the bug, to pull other people in, to find other people who think maybe differently than you, and to be part of what we're building. So there's a bunch of you I know that are part of the House of Delegates. We want you guys all to stay up to speed with what we're working on. And I want to make you all aware that this group, all of you, have instigated. You guys are the big instigators. We are now working with about 30 different organizations on something called Meeting of America. And the Meeting of America is what we're doing right now at scale with millions of people. And we know that the American people are up for it and need it. People feel that we're in a moment of crisis, and your showing up was the evidence that we needed, that people are willing to get in rooms, talk respectfully, share their opinions, their common dreams and values about America. And so I just hope you guys feel the pride of showing up today and being part of this. It's not easy work. It's the hard work that if we have enough hope, enough belief in each other, it's not an exaggeration to say that the world is counting on us. I think everybody knows how dire the situation is. Everybody knows how many crises are combining at one time, and how many reckonings are happening in our society. It's never happened like this before. You can look at 100 years ago. This is at a whole other pace and level. So continue to work at it, continue to believe in it, continue to spread the word. And I hope that all of you will participate in our next events. And again, just feel some pride for being part of it today. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And we will be sending a recap to you too. We're furiously taking notes throughout. And so we want to make sure that you guys can get that too, that we can also see what else was said in other groups. So we will be doing that. Without further ado, I think that was a lot of great work put towards creating a better country. Facilitators, if you want to stay on to debrief, we'd be happy to do that. Everybody else, feel free to put any other comments you want in the chat, but we really respect your time today. Please fill out that evaluation too, so we can get you plugged into next steps, but also see what do we need to do, what were the most important parts to you, what had the best impact, and just want to say thank you. It has been great to hear, discuss, and dream with all of you guys today.
Thank you.